I get on my hands and knees and I take his hands and I look up at him and I say, Dad, I really love you and I forgive you. And I remember his eyes teared up and he looked down at me and almost like a toddler would respond. He was like, "You do?" I said, "Yeah, I do. I forgive you and I love you so much." He said, I love you and I forgive you too. Later that day, they have found him and he was unconscious and he never regained consciousness. It is probably the most painful and beautiful moment I've had in my life.
Welcome to this episode of Rooted Recovery Stories, and happy Pride Month to you all. My name is Patrick Custer and I'm your host. So very excited to be here with my guest today, media mogul and founder of My PR Lab, and just an all-around wonderful human being with a transformational story. David Hawkins is here with me today. You're going to hear about childhood trauma, addiction, family enmeshment, geographical transformation, hope, resilience, and so much more. The list goes on. Not going to waste any more time with the intro because this episode is so good that it's in two parts. So I'm going to challenge you to stick through the first one and watch the second, because this interview is truly going to change your perspective. With that, I want to welcome my guest, David Hawkins. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So my first question is an easy one. I'm going to go easy on you here.
Okay.
What was it like growing up in your hometown in South Carolina?
Rural South Carolina, for a obviously effeminate or gay othered kid in the 90s was pretty brutal. It was in an era when toxic masculinity was revered, not only for those who naturally leaned towards that behavior trait, but for someone like me who found it impossible to get to a place where I wasn't looked at as an other or very different. Even my own goals.
Wait, do you feel like you ever got there?
No. By the time no. And I'm glad I didn't now. But I think that even for me and for others in a position like mine, it's hard to not have a goal to assimilate to toxic masculinity in order to survive. So unfortunately, it was kind of a subconscious goal for me to shed my own behaviors and my own mannerisms and lean into what would keep me safe on a day-to-day basis.
I'm still trying to figure out if that's where my internalized homophobia started, or
it's hard. I mean,
was it other like archetypes?
It's probably a seed of it. I mean, I think that those internalized homophobia is dynamic in its origins, but it has to start somewhere. And I think certainly there could be seeds of that in all of us.
Yeah. Were there any other early messages you received about it being different?
Yeah, I remember by the time I got to like 4th or 5th grade, we had just moved to this smaller town. And the very first thing people do or did, they introduced themselves and they immediately asked, "What church do you go to?" And it was always really odd for me, one, because we didn't attend church, but also I wondered, like, what is that like, how does my answer reflect on how we move forward in this conversation? Even as a kid, understanding that if someone were to respond, "Oh, we're a Methodist," well, that's different than if someone says, "Oh, we're Baptist." And even within the religions, if you went to one Methodist church versus another Methodist church, that it really colored their experience and the shelf that they placed you, or the box that they put you in. And I had a lot of anxiety about it.
Sure.
Because we didn't go.
Being from the South, not to other you, but it is unusual.
It is.
And so I have to imagine that early on, there might have been a first that this type of scenario happened and made a huge impact on you. Do you remember any specific
talking about the
one.
church stuff?
Yeah, when somebody like a time where somebody
Yes.
put you in a position where you had to answer. And
It's actually, so I have a song coming out in June, and the story I'm about to tell you is a direct tie into this song. So I was in the summer between 4th and 5th grade, and my best friends were Jenny and John. This brother and sister, very different from how I grew up, very religious, very conservative. But we just vibed. Like the three of us were like the Three Musketeers. And I remember them asking if I was going to join them at Vacation Bible School. And I'd never been. And to me at the time, that just seemed like so much fun. It was social. My best friends were going. They did crafts. They did performances. It was not colored in religion or faith. It was social and fun. So I begged my mom, and she leaned and said, okay, the church is across the street. Your best friends are going. Like, what else are you going to do during the summer? Let's try Vacation Bible School for the first time. And so I went, and I would come home every day, and I would tell her, oh my gosh, I had the most fun. I auditioned for the musical. I have a solo in the show. I'm so excited. My mom was like, wow, what have I been holding off on? He's coming home having had a great day. He's exhausted. He's seen his friends. Maybe I should have leaned into this Vacation Bible School thing sooner. So the day comes around for the big show, and all the parents are there, and the musical starts, and I'm really, really excited because my solo is coming up. And so we all had letters. My letter was I, and my solo was S-I-N, and the I in the middle is me. And the fact that they gave the I in sin to the obviously zesty kid.
Zesty. I'm claiming that as a positive. I love that. I've never heard that term
It's
before.
a reclamation, right?
Oh,
like, yeah. I was zesty, proud, still am proud
I'm
of
gonna
it.
put that on my Instagram bio.
Yeah, zesty Patrick. I love it. We can share the anointment.
Yes.
But it was the first time that it was more a reaction to what I saw my mom go through. She was ashamed of herself as a parent for putting her baby in that situation, confused that all of the other kids and parents would, in essence, target me by making me the I in sin, making me the obvious, like, oof. And so it was the first time that there was a juxtaposition between faith, religion, organized religion, Bible camp, and feeling targeted and othered. We didn't do much Vacation Bible School after that.
What was the consequence? Obviously, it goes without saying the emotional consequence of you realizing when you did. I'm sure that as your mom conveyed behind closed doors, being upset, then you realized even more than your child mind probably did.
Yeah.
But when I say what was the consequence thereafter, clearly you didn't just happen upon these people in this church. Like, you were involved with friends there, and what was there fallout? Was there dissonance? Was there?
I didn't know it until later on, probably 3 or 4 years later. But it was the validation that my mom really needed. Her intuition from the jump, because she grew up Church of Christ, really, really extreme in their fundamentalism in the South in the 50s and 60s. She was afraid of having, she was intuiting correctly that I would be different, that I would be gay. And she knew from her experiences that those types of individuals were not treated well. This was also the age when conversion therapy and like Pray the Gay Away and camps were becoming very popular.
Yeah.
And she was afraid that if I participated in church, any church that a youth group leader or a pastor or someone of authority within the church would come in and basically tell me, like, you're wrong and we can fix it. We've got tools that we can employ that will make you not a sinner or not bad in essence. And my mom has always said, she's done really great things and she's had her challenges, but one of the things she always told me that she leaned on was the most divine thing in the world is being able to love your child wholly. Holy, H-O-L-E, and W-H-O-L. So it was a validation to her that, yeah, she got out of her comfort zone. She let me try this. And the very first thing that came out was S-I-N, and the I in the middle is me. So I didn't know it until a couple years later, but she was able to kind of unpack it and spell it out for me. Like, here's what my intuition was. It was validated here. So we're going to go a different route when it comes to learning about religion, learning about faith, and being spiritual.
During that time or thereafter, as you've eloquently explained, you had a natural target on your back for being zesty.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's possible for those decades for anyone to have lived through that and not been bullied, walked through immense amounts of fear, and quite frankly, resulted in forms of isolation. Mm-hmm. What enabled you to survive those periods of time?
Yeah, so the bullying was really, the older I get and the farther away I am from the ages that I was when I was bullied.
What were those ages? Or was
it was really bad in like 6th grade, so that would be like 11, 12. That was probably when it started, and then for the next 2 or 3 years, it reached a crescendo. It's funny because I recently got married, and my husband comes from thank you. He comes from a very large family. I don't. So I'm getting to uncle now all these amazing young children, and to see some of the nieces and nephews at the same age that I was when the bullying was at its peak breaks my heart, because these are babies. These are so they're just like actual kids. So it was also, the more I speak about it to people, even other LGBTQ individuals who experienced bullying, I've learned that mine was pretty extreme. What I endured was on the extreme side of the spectrum. So a lot of broken bones.
I was going to ask you, what can you talk about and paint a bit of a picture of? I think it's helpful sometimes when talking about the safety and the healing that you found.
Yeah. What
actually happened?
So
before, it
was constant. I remember in 6th grade, probably the 2nd or 3rd day, coming home and saying, "Mom, what's a faggot and why am I being called that?" So I learned what faggot, the word. I learned what gay, I learned what homosexuality was in the context of it being a terrible thing and everyone else apparently knowing it and me not. So lots of layers there, right? Like the fact that they're identifying me as something that I didn't even know existed. Oh, it's also terrible and you're going to beat me up for it, was a lot for, an 11-year-old, 12-year-old to process.
And can I just pause right there, because I want you to finish that. But personally, I believe that the worst fear that we can suffer on this earth is the fear of the unknown. So you're telling me a child all of a sudden is being called a word they don't understand and told that they are this thing that they don't know, they've never heard of, but it's bad, it's the worst, and you're going to receive physical punishment for it. So,
and I can't change it.
And you can't change it.
Because I have no idea that I'm different from anyone else. I didn't see myself as zesty. I didn't see myself as effeminate or girly or sissy or whatever they were calling me. I saw myself as a peer. And some of these people that were now beating me up had been my best friend a year earlier in elementary school. So it was very confusing. It felt like walking in landmines, and there was nothing I could do. So the bullying continued, and it went from verbal to violence, probably over the course of the first 6 months of the school year. And where it was at its worst was, we would have PE a couple times a week, and the locker rooms were a place where adults weren't allowed to be. So without them being there, and with it just being a group of young boys.
You mean like the faculty couldn't come monitor, or?
No, I guess their thought was, since everyone's changing, then they would be in and out of their clothes, and they would be in underwear, or maybe they would shower, that it was not a safe space for an adult to be. I always found that really odd, because it's like, if you don't have proclivities towards kids,
right,
then you should be in any room. They should never be left on their own.
So this is a little off topic, but like, part of me gets that, because given the day and age, not when, because you and I are close to the same age.
Yes.
So like when we were that age, I don't think this was going on as much, but like the last like 10, 15 years, yeah, I can totally understand, because more and more, as an adult, oh God, especially as a different adult, as a queer adult, am I concerned and aware when I'm around children of because I know that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I totally understand why an adult might be, a teacher even, might be concerned for some reason. But should that outweigh, like, when you're in administration, like, figure it out.
Figure it out, right?
You know?
Exactly. Yeah. Where there's a challenge, there is a solution.
Yes.
And I truly believe that. And they missed the mark on taking that all the way to the finish line. Like, yeah, it's a challenge, but there should have been a way to figure it out. But they didn't. And so whether it was like a playground in an area where the teachers or administration weren't in view, or especially in the locker rooms, the actual physical violence was brutal. Fractured eye socket, stitches, broken collarbones, broken arms. And I'd come home, battered and beaten. And my parents would be like, what the hell is happening? And they would go in, they would talk to the principal, they would talk to the administration. Nothing ever changed. The only time it changed is when my dad was like, well, we're going to have to teach you how to defend yourself.
So let me ask you, because when we hear about stories of abuse,
yeah,
I feel like it typically goes two ways when somebody tells about it. Nothing's done, or something's done, and the abuse gets worse because the abuser doesn't, they're lashing out even harder.
Yeah.
So what was it in your scenario?
When action was taken by staff, it usually resulted in a double down of violence from the kid, because then they got in trouble, whether it was from their parents or from the staff.
So they were taking action. It was that latter thing of you just. And so then what message did you get?
At a certain point, I said to myself, it's better to take the licks, because the first round is usually a lot lighter than the second. Which is tough for adult David to see little David in my mind's eye, and to now have representation in my husband's nieces and nephews, to know that someone like that size and of that age is forced to create their own best of worst. Tough.
What did you tell yourself about why this was happening to you?
I was really confused, because I didn't know what made me different. I really wanted to have clarity. I wanted to be able for someone to say, here's what you do that makes you effeminate or gay or a target of being called a faggot. I remember asking my stepdad at the time, when I do things that make me sound gay, will you please let me know? And he did. He later apologized. He said, I should have never done that to you. I should have empowered you and told you that you were perfect just the way you were. But he was trying to help.
Yeah.
We were trying to find solutions so that I didn't stick out, so that I didn't get beat.
Well, in all honesty, I mean, like, I don't know if this is inappropriate for me to say, but you and I both sound gay. Like,
I
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, if somebody
absolutely.
listened to us, you could hear, and I don't know how you sounded back then, but like,
Probably
in
gayer.
a town, right? Okay. So like, aside from moving and changing to a school, like at that time,
It was impossible.
what do you do as a parent?
You're just chasing something that's never gonna happen. So it was, the older I get, the more I connect with how, those wounds didn't go anywhere.
Right.
The bones healed, and I grew up and was able to find situations in communities where I was safe.
What were they?
So at about by the time I was leaving 8th grade, it was bad, but it was daily life. So I had kind of, as anybody does, whether you're in an abusive relationship with a partner or a parent or a community, you just kind of, that's normal, right? Like it just becomes normal. But I was beginning to fear mortality because these were now young men who, some of them were like 6 foot, 200 pounds. We were about to enter high school where we would have more autonomy in parking lots or in hallways. We would have cars. I feared being chased. These are basically the size of grown men. And I'm still pretty small. I am now, was then. So luckily, there was a new school that I had heard about, a boarding arts school in South Carolina, truly unheard of and remarkable. And something just told me, like, if they're anything like I am, then the likelihood of me being around softer, more compassionate people skyrockets. And nothing could be as worse as what I was in. So I worked really, really hard. I auditioned in 2 disciplines, creative writing and theater, and was accepted in for both. It was the fourth graduating year, so the program was very new. It had only had 3 years prior, so it was exactly what I had hoped. All of a sudden, I was surrounded by not just other queer individuals, but the LGBTQIA population in 2002, oversaturated more than people that were not queer. So for the first time, I am in an environment where there are more queer people than there are straight people. And we were able to bond on a lot of different levels, but a lot of that was leaving our public school or our traditional schooling, one, because we love the arts and it's something that we lean into and we have the talent, but also so that we didn't have the distraction of bullying or violence, and that we were able to really lean into community. So it was the first time that I was able to turn the page and advocate and do everything in my power for me to put myself in a better, healthier position. And I thrived.
I know you did. So emotionally creatively, and in terms of self-worth, how did discovering theater ultimately shift things for you?
So theater for me was a safe space even before I got to the Governor's School, which is the boarding school that I went to, because it's usually where you think of Glee, right?
Yeah.
So it was very much that. It was it was the island of misfit toys.
You know, what's his name from Glee lives here now?
Chris Culver?
The teacher that everybody had a crush on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
He was at side note.
Yeah.
I think it was Cody, showcase for Cody Blue some months back. We got to meet him, and he was such a lovely human being.
I can't recall his name, but
I can't either.
He comes
so
into the restaurant that I represent all the time.
Yeah. You're a special person. We admire you, and we appreciate all your work.
Yeah.
I just have bad memory. So, and welcome to Nashville. Still.
And welcome to Nashville.
Yeah. Continue.
So it was acting. The community in itself was a safe space. I never had to worry about getting beat up at play rehearsal. And it was something that I was really good at. I struggled finding arenas to build confidence because a lot of those were gatekept by toxic masculinity. When I did football in 6th grade, and it was just an invitation for another.
Sorry, can I share a laugh with you?
Absolutely. Defensive back, baby.
But the fact that you just said I did football, because I caught it, but like that's exactly how I would talk about it.
I did
too.
it.
Ooh, sports.
Or I would be like, I'm going to go rehearse football. And be like, it's not a rehearsal, it's a practice.
I'm dead.
But yeah, there were not a lot of traditional arenas for me to feel safe enough to build confidence.
Yeah.
And theater became that space, and I was naturally really talented at it, and I liked it. So when I went to my boarding school, it was made very clear to me by the administration that this was something that I should really be considering for college and for career. And for the first time, I really felt like, okay, this is a track. This is something that has longevity to it, that I'm really good at, that people are telling me that I should really consider pursuing.
What did it mean to you to find something that was a space where your difference wasn't something to hide, but something that actually made you shine for the first time?
It was like finally the outside was mirroring the inside, because I always knew that I was special and that I was robust and that I had an appetite to thrive. But until then, there had been no, pardon the pun, stage. So it was, it felt appropriate. I was like, yeah, I've been here all along. So it felt nice to finally have a place to be.
That moment of sorry, my heart for a second there, because I'm reflecting on, you're at this age where you're saying it felt nice to have a place to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really amazing that there are so many now. I'm sure there's work to be done. But I get really, really excited to discover the future leaders of this country, of this planet, knowing that they have had safer spaces sooner. Mm-hmm. And that those wounds won't be as deep or won't last as long, and that they can just begin to focus on how they can make the world a better place rather than just surviving.
True. And this is where I will add in how and why stories like yours and so many others and mine are so important, because as a wise person, and I have no idea who said this, but it was probably an old white man, but if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a more eloquent way to say that, but the essence of that is so true. Mm-hmm. There's so much to celebrate in how far we've come.
Truly.
There's a lot of regression happening currently, though, as well.
Yeah.
So regardless of what's happening legislatively, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and what they experience, they're still completely not saying exactly not saying that they aren't suffering, but it's nothing like the world you and I grew up in.
Yeah. Yeah. But, it's hard to, they're living in their own, I could also have some blind spots or some privilege and not I don't have kids, I'm
Sure.
not hearing it day to day. I know that their fears are valid.
Oh yeah, and they're bullied in different ways. I mean, all of a sudden you can have, instead of everybody who is in the locker room breaking your bones, you can have 1,000 bullies online, on social media, getting into a place of just not wanting to live anymore.
Sure.
So, my comparison there was probably ill-applied. And I think that my intention was to say that our stories don't have the purpose of sharing them and learning from them and hearing them, and the trauma and the healing don't have an expiration or shelf life.
Yeah.
They still have power to change, which is why we're doing this today, why we're making an impact year round, but especially the month of Pride.
Yeah. You're right. It's important. And I think that that's what makes gay history, and that's what makes looking back on gay history a really important part. I would encourage anyone in those generations that you mentioned to learn a little bit more about what's gone on from the 80s to now. Certainly from the 80s to now, so that they can put it in perspective. They can have gratitude, but also understand how far they've come and how far they have to go.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I want to transition a little bit to your family dynamics. What was the dynamic like at home when you were growing up, but more specifically around addiction and mental health?
So there's two sides of this coin. My biological father, Mark, he was present in my life until about the age of 10. What I was not aware of until my mom wanted to divorce him was his level of alcoholism and his family's alcoholism. My mom shared with me that I was a newborn, and his mom, my grandmother, had come up to visit me, offered to give my mom and dad a date night. They'd come back and found her passed out on the bed and me screaming, dirty diaper. Have no idea how long that had been. So very quickly, my mom was like, okay, this is not just my husband's issue. This is something familial. And she stuck around as long as she could. But by the age of 10, he was defiant in a way where it's like, I'm perfectly fine. The house is paid for. You're being taken care of. I'm providing to our child. So if I want to get obliterated every night after work, that's what I'm going to do. And she just, I can't imagine that would, I can imagine that would be very hard to continue to fall in love with someone who is not loving themselves and who's making these excuses and finding all these reasons why it remains okay for him to get blackout drunk every night. Unfortunately, in that...
Is this your perspective as an adult looking back, or are you narrating this right now for us through the lens of what you understood at that time?
The lens I understood at the time was my dad was great. He was around. He loved me a lot. And then the moment my mom went to divorce him, she created a very unhealthy dynamic with me in the form of codependency, and overshared her truths with a 9-year-old about his dad. And I don't know if she did it consciously or subconsciously, but of course it colored my experience with my dad, and it made me disloyal and dislike him because of all these terrible things that he was doing to force my mom to file for divorce. So it jump-started a dynamic that would last the rest of his life, where I didn't have an identity of my dad other than the one that my mom fed me, which was he's a terrible human that didn't love us enough to stop drinking, and he's just a drunk. No one with an addiction is that simple.
Yeah.
So I wish I had a different experience where I was able to find the compassion that I ultimately did sooner for him.
Can you briefly describe for me, now looking back, what you hold and remember to be the parts of him that you loved and appreciated and admired before that perspective was changed?
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever been asked that question, so thank you. It's really nice to be invited to share about the good things about him. He loved me very obviously. It was, I am lucky that I have a lot of photos, and I was recently going through them, and you can see how he holds me, how much he loves me. And although he wasn't great at finding the things that we could both do together passionately, he did try a lot of things that he was passionate about. A lot of them being sports related. So baseball, soccer, football, basketball, camping, things that I didn't have a natural proclivity to, but he did. And he really wanted to instill those things and share those things with me. And he never really stopped trying to love me, but his alcoholism grew year after year, and that took him farther and farther from everyone and everything. Yeah. So the older I got, the more I knew that the love was always there. He was just burdened with so many things that kept him from being his best and most lovable self. He was a good man.
Yeah.
Just really troubled.
I appreciate you sharing. As a person in long-term recovery, especially from alcoholism,
Yeah.
It means a lot to hear that side.
It's a nice question to be asked. So thank you.
Yeah. So you shared that your mom used your relationship as a kid as an emotional Band-Aid.
Correct.
How did that shape your understanding of love, safety, and responsibility?
So for the first 25 years of my life, I had this Pollyanna rose-colored tinted relationship with my mom. The things that she did great were unheard of at the time. So I came out at 14. She already knew that I was going to be gay. She was preparing herself. She immediately started to try and find me support groups, and she herself became a part of the community. She was tremendously supportive of my coming out, of me dating, of me having real experiences as an adolescent that I was able to participate in, and I just so happened to be gay. And so that was a huge difference, and something that a lot of people really revered about my mom. She was very proud of that herself. And of course, I was the one in direct response, or the one that got to benefit from it. She is beautiful. She's charismatic. She's effervescent. She's had times in her life where she was very career driven and very successful. But what I didn't know is the entire time, her trauma with her family, especially her mother and father, was influencing her foundation of a relationship with me. And especially once the circumstance with my father happened and they divorced, I became less of a child and more of a companion. And
the surrogate partner.
Yeah.
Surrogate spouse.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I now know that she overshared tremendously at inappropriate times of my childhood. I now understand that she put me in a position and an expectation to parent her, to love on her, to create safe spaces for her to melt down, for her to fall apart. And she required me to be the one and only person that would never leave her, that would always have a safe space for her, full, unabashed commitment, which
That's a lot of responsibility.
It's a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure for a kid growing into a young adult. Mm-hmm. A lot of pressure. Pressure that was bound to
explode.
Correct. Yeah, that was a ticking time bomb for sure.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admissions center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
I don't know if it's fair to measure these, but I'm going to ask you, looking back, what felt more intense? The pressure that you just described with your mom, or the pressure surrounding being born incorrectly and not fully only being accepted in these spaces where you're okay over here, but the rest of the world and all these other areas, you're not safe?
I wish I had a more eloquent answer. I think she did so she and I have a natural bond. This is not something that we had to force or fake. We adored each other. We laughed together. It was a friendship. Like, even though I now know it was inappropriate to coordinate a relationship with your child as she did, it didn't mean that we didn't have a lot of fun and a natural, deep, strong connection to each other. So it didn't feel false or like I was doing anything wrong in our relationship until I began to create and enforce my own boundaries, or that I was not perfect in her eye, or began to have some pretty major missteps with my own use and addiction.
Well, now hold on. People only start creating boundaries once they've realized something's off.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, this is a good bridge or segue into the use portion of our chat. So when she discovered, and I was truthful about my kind of first round of use with crystal meth, it was like smashing a picture of me into a million pieces. The love and pride that she had for me immediately dissolved, and she was she was mean, and she was cold. I remember her, when we talked about it, she was like, "What, do you need to go to rehab now?" Like, that was her first response. Not, "Oh my God, how deep in are we? Have you considered rehab? What can I do to help?" It was like, "Oh God, now I don't have a perfect son anymore. Like, oh, I can't be proud of you anymore." It was like an inconvenience to her. And gosh, this gives me anxiety to talk about. And it was the big pivot in our relationship when I still had to parent her in my darkest moment. I still had to basically tell her, "I'm going to be okay. I'm going to put myself together. This is all on me. This is not about you. This is not about you as a parent. This is all about me. I'm the bad one. I've done all the bad things. I got this. Don't worry about me." And anytime she extended resource or bandwidth, for instance, she moved me out of LA and back into an apartment with her in North Carolina. And the amount of times I have heard what that cost her financially over the course of many, many years far outweighs the times where she was soft and compassionate and curious about how I'd gotten to that space. It was more about, wow, you've cost me $15,000 moving you. So, as our relationship soured, at this point, I'm still very confused. It's like a breakup, oddly, like when someone begins, like the best way I can describe it is like, let's say you're partnered with someone and you're living together and they decide to shut down, be cold, be nasty, but they don't break up with you. And you're left wondering, how do I save this? What have I done? I'm the antagonist. I'm the reason. And that was a really, to hold space for being a burden while also coming to terms with the fact that I am in the midst of a really dark addiction, introduced the idea that maybe my relationship with my mom wasn't healthy and that new boundaries needed to form.
Now, were you in the middle of struggling with your addiction and trying to develop what I'm thinking about is like, because I can only imagine trying to develop like healthy boundaries while I myself am battling addiction. Or was this at a point where you had gone to treatment and were in a sober state?
I've never gone to treatment. I think my mom's...
Oh, she just brought you back to... I thought the whole amount of money we're talking about was...
She made it very clear that would be an embarrassment and that would be too costly to send me to rehab. And that the way that I was going to get sober was to, at 27 years old, move in with my mother and basically be on lockdown in her home.
If you are listening or watching and have any feeling that you need to go to rehab or have a friend, parent, loved one, hear me and know this and reach out to me. There are options. Yes, it can be too costly, but there are absolutely options. I think that's a misconception many people have.
Yeah, we didn't explore it. We didn't explore anything about it. It was just so... I mean, I can't speak for her, but maybe that made it seem too real for her, but the thing about it is we did have the money and we did have the resources. I think it was an embarrassment.
Sure. Oh, you mean shame led the charge for making a terrible decision? Right.
Yeah. And I guess it would be like an admission to her, like, oh, wow, he's really up the creek. And like, and this is also her name's Deborah, and this is a very Deborah-ism, like, oh, I'll fix him myself.
Well, it sounds like she had been having to do a lot of that. She had been telling herself that she was that was her full-time job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I feel like we could flush that story out forever, but there's so much more to get to, and I want to
chapters to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, okay, with your father, the relationship was marked by absence and pain, but you had a moment of connection before he passed.
Yes.
Can you walk us through what that was like? And we haven't really gotten into what led to his passing.
So my dad continued to drink. He was a highly functioning addict for a lot of years. He was a professional. He was a great salesman. He had a relationship for 17 years with a lovely woman. He'd been in and out of rehab a couple times, but he'd never had therapy, ever. So... there's only so much that you can do when you're gone for 30 or 60 days and you come back and nothing has changed. Your partner still drinks. Your mom's still an alcoholic. Your tendencies are the same. So I'll never know what the catalyst was for his last major downfall, but in the course of about 60 days, the lady that he had lived with for 20 years, who also happened to own a business that he was employed by, who she also owns the houses that they owned and the cars that they drove, that all went away. And I know from my own addiction, when there's nothing to live for and no hope and no accountability, the first warm, safe space to go to is to your substance of choice. And so he never got out of that. Over the course of about 5 years, he went from a professional with a job and a house and a career to a man in his early 60s who had developed alcohol-related dementia and who was falling all the time. And we were concerned about, remember there was this one time he fell in his own kitchen. His skin was thin, his blood was thin. He almost bled out on the floor. And this is just from a simple fall. So it did not surprise me at all that the family began to prepare and assume that this was going to be the end. So June of 2021, in the midst of COVID chaos, I thought it was important for me to go and see him. Mm-hmm. At that point, we had gotten to a place where we would call each other, we would check in, but I would try not to answer the phone or speak if I thought it was a late hour, or if I could tell he was intoxicated. It just didn't feel healthy for me to receive that. But there were times when we chatted. So I decided to go down and see him. He lived close to my grandmother, so I stayed with my grandmother. And I called him and I said, "Hey, I'd like to cook you dinner tonight. Do you want to come over?" And he sounded good. And he said, "Yeah, I'd love that." So I went to the beach by myself and came home and I told my grandma, "Hey, my dad's coming over for dinner. I'm going to cook dinner for the three of us." And it was like all the blood left her face. Just like, what? He's coming over? I was like, "Yeah, I'm here. Like, I'd love to see him. I'd love to cook dinner." And she was like, "Well, there's some things I haven't told you." It's like, "Okay, well, what's that?" And she said, "Well, about 9 months ago, your dad stopped bathing. He is full dementia and is highly intoxicated at any time that he is awake." So I guess I was trying to prepare, but there's no preparing for what I saw that day. He was 2.5 hours late to dinner. We waited outside on the porch. We saw him drive past the house that he grew up in, that my grandmother has owned for over 60 years, 3 times. And it was like he was driving in an area that he'd never been in.
This is the house you were in?
Correct.
Okay.
So we're concerned. We're like, why does he keep circling? And so he finally pulls in, he like kind of barrels into the yard. I rush out. I open the door, and at that point I had forgotten to put it in park. So he let his foot off the brake and the truck starts rolling. It's chaos. I'm shoving it into park and he's kind of like looking at me dazed. I have seen and smelled people that are unhoused that looked and smelled like him. So that was very difficult to see the physical effects of his dementia and his alcoholism. So I bring him in the house, and my grandmother's queen of denial, and we're just kind of going about things like he's not completely obliterated. I cook him dinner, and oddly enough, he finishes the dinner, which I know this doesn't sound like much to some, but if you've ever known an alcoholic who is at that point, they rarely eat. Mm-hmm. They're nauseated by the thought of it, and it's hard for them to get things down. Mm-hmm. And he finished everything. And it was at that moment I was like, there's still something in him that I think I can connect with right now. So after dinner, I come back in and I get on my hands and knees and I take his hands and I look up at him and I say, you know, Dad, I really love you and I forgive you. And I remember his eyes teared up and he looked down at me and almost like a toddler would respond. He was like, you do? And I said, yeah, I do. I forgive you and I love you so much. And he said, I love you and I forgive you too. And we sat for another couple minutes and I ended up driving him home. And it was about 4 months later that he had been told by the doctors that one more drink could send him into a coma. I got a call from his brother saying that he had been missing for a couple days. And later that day, they had found him and he was unconscious. He had had a lot to drink and he never regained consciousness. So it is probably the most painful and beautiful moment I've had in my life. It is a blessing to have had a chance to have closure and connection before his passing. And I'm proud of myself because I was in the midst of my own addiction at the time. And I'm proud of him for reaching as deep as he could to receive it and to reflect it back to me. And I encourage anyone who has an intuition that maybe this is the last time I get to see someone to humble themselves enough to share in an experience like I was gifted. It was life-changing.
I can only imagine. How did that final dinner with your father reshape your understanding of healing and forgiveness?
Oh, gosh. It was interesting because when he looked at me and he said, I forgive you too, my first immediate response was like, for what?
That's exactly what I thought when you said it.
But then as the dust from the grief of losing him has settled and the robbery of more time with him, the mortality has really set in, what I realized I contributed to was, even in my adulthood, even after I could form my own opinions and have my own relationship with his addiction, only until I was in the midst of mine could I see my participation in us not being as close as possible, of me not advocating for more time or being more clear or asking to go to therapy with him or be an active participant in our healing. I assumed a narrative that was fed to me many, many years prior that he's just a drunk, he doesn't love you, he left us. And for far too long, I let that be the definitive.
Yeah.
And so he did have some things to forgive me for.
Yeah.
So I think it burst my heart open to empathy.
Good.
Yeah.
Switching gears here for a second. When did meth first come into your life and how quickly did it become a grip you could not shake?
I moved to New York City when I was 19, and over the course of about 7-8 years, thrived. I had a booming career. I launched and sold a business for a good amount of money. I was vacationing in Fire Island with some of the most incredible young men every summer. I was traveling, and about 8 years into New York, I decided I've been here for a long time, you know, in your 20s, you think that's a long time. And I had gone through a really rough breakup, and I thought, I had been approached by a PR firm in Los Angeles who was looking to hire a really gritty New York style publicist. And when they reached out to me and offered me what was on paper a dream job, I didn't feel like I had the opportunity to say no to it. I don't have regrets, but I have curiosities. If I had just said politely no, I'm going to stay in New York, I'm going to keep this up. But it was glossy and sexy, and I had already made friends with people in LA from working out there on some projects, and LA on paper, and I had gone on many trips there and having had friends there, it just felt kind of like a natural next step in my career. And for many in the entertainment industry, it is. And the job offer was corner office assistant. They were going to move me out. They were going to spend tens of thousands of dollars to move me out there. They had a corporate apartment in a luxury building for 6 months paid for. I mean, this was a very hard decision to say no to. So I said yes. And I went out to LA. It immediately felt different than when I had visited. And I can't really put my finger on why. But I began to feel like in New York, I was like, 8.5 out of 10 on an attractive scale. And in LA, I just seemed invisible. I think in New York at that time for me, there was a combination of you could be stylish and you could be intellectual. And those were all elements that made you attractive. And when I was dropped down into LA, it was like, unless I looked a certain way, those parts of my personality were not going to be seen. So I began to feel really, really insecure.
Now, are you talking about just romantically in dating, or even just in connecting in the entertainment world?
Human to human.
Wow.
Whether it's dating, finding a friend, relating to coworkers. I had always heard you're either New York or you're LA. And I was like, no, I'm everything. I can be everything. I'm well liked in any room. And when I got out there, there's a lot of things I know now about the PR firm and some things that I wasn't privy to. I got a job that everybody else in the LA office was expecting to get. So I walked into a pariah swarm.
Yeah.
So there was no safety at work. I didn't have a ton of friends, and, dating and social life were, I was still in my early 20s. I think I was probably 130 pounds soaking wet. I couldn't gain muscle if I tried. And so I looked very different from the masses of beautiful people in LA. And so the parts of me that I was most confident about, that I was most excited to share, were gate kept by me not being as attractive as others. So it left a lot of time when I wasn't working to go online and to look for dates, for hookups. And oddly, New York, I'd heard of crystal meth, but I'd never been in the same room with it, not to my knowledge. I was never offered it. It was not as rampant online. But in LA, it just seemed to be so readily available, and that so many people were doing it that it was normalized and at times glamorized. Mm-hmm. And I suddenly found myself as one of the hottest guys in the room of people who are all using crystal meth. And I would say probably 6 months to 9 months, I had quit my job and was using every day. It was like a rampant cancer that just, it was just one of those drugs that it was like it was scientifically formulated specifically for me.
You found that button.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I pressed it over and over. And so in a matter of 9 months, I was a full-blown addict, and I didn't admit it to myself then because I was still like hanging out with all these
Because
glamorous
you were a full-blown
people.
addict. Why would you admit it to yourself? Are you kidding me?
Exactly. Yeah. So that was the invitation of what would become a decade-long battle.
Good God, you're a miracle.
We all are.
I know,
Yeah.
but I know meth. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm in the industry.
Yeah.
I see what happens.
Yeah.
People don't survive 10 years of meth.
No,
meth
and
addiction.
there's lots of, we don't have time
Yeah.
for all of the nooks and crannies of where I have been in the last in that decade of time.
Okay, you've described being in terrifying relationships, even living with a violent partner. What helped you survive environments that seemed unsurvivable?
Tough question. I'm not really a super faithful person. I find curiosity and levity in spirituality, but like, I couldn't sit right down and, tell you my relationship with God. The only part of me that it introduces concept of that are moments like that where I don't know how I didn't die or how I survived or how I had the balls to leave when all the cards were stacked against me and the death threats were real and the attempts were made and the restraining order was violated 8 times. I mean, it was I don't know. I guess I'm just meant to be here, like I just kept putting one foot in front of the other, and
I hear you.
I don't know. I wish I had that answer.
You don't have to,
Yeah.
but I also feel like what you just said was an answer.
Okay. Yeah.
You eventually moved back to your hometown and launched a successful business. Mm-hmm. On the outside, it looked like success, but behind the scenes, addiction was still running the show. What was that double life like?
Things got really bad when all of a sudden I started going to a drug counselor. I started going to therapy. I started learning more about the drug, about the science of it, about what it does to my body, to my emotions, to my levels, hormone levels. Didn't mean that I was always sober when I was in this process, but I was beginning the end of use. I wanted to know how that it didn't have to feel so a part of me, like breathing or drinking water or sleep. I wanted to know how I could unbraid the threads and fabric that had attached to me. And in that process, sometimes you go to therapy for one thing and you learn so many other things.
Sometimes. It shows up to therapy. Excuse me, this is not what I ordered.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wanted the mom issues on the side, please. And as I learned more about myself, why addiction was so possible for me biologically,
Which, can I interject in just my observation? So one of my questions is, what does it mean to be a high functioning addict, and how did hiding your pain impact your spirit? Goes right along in line with talking about genetically.
Yeah.
Not only were you predisposed, but when we put a mirror to Dad, working, high functioning,
Yeah.
trying as much as he could no matter what,
Yeah.
till he was a certain age. I look at you and what you did. Now, your version of trying obviously ended in a different place than his.
Yeah.
And thank God was successful, you know. But it's so interesting to me because high functioning addicts are just interesting, because I wasn't one, and many of us aren't. Y'all are weird.
It's a survival
and I
skill.
love you, and I'm grateful for you, people. You know, but like you're also the most, in my opinion, the most difficult types of people who suffer with addiction.
Yeah.
To get sober.
Yeah.
From the perspective of a professional who works in the addiction world.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it was at that point, money wasn't an object, so there was no obstacle there in terms of affording it. I had a condo that I didn't have any roommates and no other accountability, so there was a venue, and I had a business that had staff to run it. And so if I didn't go to the office for 4 or 5 days, nothing really changed.
no consequence.
No consequences. I had about 9 months. It was the longest stretch of sobriety that I'd ever had in 2020. I'm sorry, in 2019. And by March, when the nationwide lockdown happened, all of a sudden, the things I loved about my life, which was I'm busy, I have a business, I'm giving back to charity, I'm in therapy, I am aware, I'm in drug counseling, all of those really dried up, and was left with time, money, and a venue. And it was one of the chapters that the drug use was the most saturated. So it was definitely a different version of my addiction, because now I felt really very much in control of circumstances, not control of the drug use, but in control of the stage that I set for it.
Right.
Which there's a lot of, you can justify that quite a bit when you're in the middle of an addiction. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I remember calling them controlled relapses at one point.
Oh my gosh.
That I would set the stage and I would only use from this time to this time. And there were only a certain number of people or participants that I would...
Actually, this is fascinating. Can you describe, these are the things that I would, if I was still in addiction,
Yeah.
hook, line, and sinker. Continue.
Control relapse for me was finding 3 or 4 days that I knew there was not going to be something that I couldn't say no to, I'm too busy here, I'm not feeling well today. It would all be done at my house. There would be a small cast of characters, people that I felt, and for the most part, were good people and I had a good time with, and we would use drugs together. And there would be an end. There'd be a deadline, whether it's when this bag runs out or when this timeline runs out. And then I would give myself 1 or 2 days to dry out, eat some food, have a vitamin IV, sleep, and show up glamorous to an event. And no one would know.
How long did that work?
You know, what's interesting is that, and there's another part of faith here. Somehow, by the end of 2020, early 2021, I was not having any more fun on the drug. I would enter into psychosis sometimes. My paranoia was...
On meth?
But those were things that had never happened to me before.
Yeah.
So the fun of it, not the fun, but the comforting, warm space that I had grown to adore began to evaporate. Didn't mean I didn't do it as much.
Right.
But then it was like torturing myself, right? Like, I'm not even having fun anymore. I'm not even having people over anymore. Like, it's not even a social thing anymore. And so...
Why weren't you having people over?
Because I was ashamed of my psychosis and paranoia, and that it just didn't feel... I couldn't lean into it. Couldn't lean into the experience anymore.
What would happen if they came over?
I felt like I wasn't a good host, or wasn't allowing for them to have a good time, because I was just so out of my fucking head.
But was there a part of you that felt threatened, that you wouldn't like, that they would see inside the fact that you weren't operating any longer in this place that they found acceptable?
Yes. Yeah. There was judgment from other people who probably weren't as bad off as I was at the time. And there was extreme paranoia because I had not had as much to lose until that time. Now I have a couple vehicles. I've got this gorgeous townhome. I'm traveling the world. I've got this successful business. I'm a big fish in a small pond in my hometown, that at any time an arrest or an association would be on the news. Because when you work in the media, no matter who you are or what relationships you have, a fall from grace is clickable. And I knew that based on how successful I had become and how public facing I was when I was sober, that it would be fascinating to people to know the underbelly of someone who was so put together.
You said that traveling started to change your relationship with addiction. It gave you a new perspective. What did you learn about yourself through those experiences? And when you said that, are you talking about when you finally made the move?
Yeah, so I started realizing that Greenville was not a healthy place for me. I wasn't proud to move back there initially. It was circumstance. And Greenville still held a lot of emotional baggage from the bullying and from growing up in a really, really conservative part of the country and being othered. Greenville is also a very odd environment where it is conservative both politically and religiously, but it's also highly cultured. So the people that live in Greenville are very moneyed. They have traveled the world. They have seen cultures. They have experienced different circumstances than their own, but they still choose to be these awful, rigid, conservative people with no empathy or sympathy. They actively choose. They've seen poverty. They've seen how other cultures live, and they still choose to stay in this safe extremist box. And there was also no gay community. There was no gay bar. There was not a gay community center. So there still kind of felt like a shameful part of an identity. And so I realized that when I would go on these trips, like I took myself to P-Town for 10 days, or I'd go out to Palm Springs for a couple weeks, that I would be there and I had zero desire to use. I would eat and be in the sun, and I'd make new friends and I'd have energy. And all of a sudden I started to put together that maybe the life that I had created back in my hometown was just as toxic as the one that I had left 10 years before, and began to consider what it would be like to move. And so I tossed around a couple different cities, couple different ideas, and kept coming back to Nashville, kept coming back. So by the time I moved here at the end of 2021, my use at home had diminished dramatically because I was always about to go on another trip. I was always like, life was beginning to blossom again. And by the time I moved here, I'd had about 6 months of sobriety. And when I moved here, just never looked back. Very non-traditional route and road to recovery, but it has worked for me.
Well, and we're learning more and more that everybody's got a different path that works for them.
Yeah.
And that it's not as black and white as we've been led to believe for so long. So,
well, and I had kind of been starved by traditional routes from the jump. I mean, with a parent that is ashamed and nervous for you to go to rehab because of what that's going to make her look like. Having to keep my addiction in the shadows, literally in her spare bedroom where I kind of, dried out for the first time.
Yeah.
And I was ready. I was ready to feel healthy again. I was ready to fall in love. I was ready to start a family. And I knew deep down that I couldn't keep fooling myself. Like, how am I marketing myself to people, but in my private time, I'm killing myself, hurting myself?
One thing I love about your story, because you and I have talked about this and shared a really special conversation where we had a heart-to-heart.
Yeah.
That I feel like it was a lunch that lasted 4 hours, and it was so wonderful.
I love those lunches.
Yes. And, I always, again, your story is so different than mine. And I'm so grateful for people who have stories like yours, because they provide hope for so many people who have similar stories. Again, why we need such a diverse array, a buffet of stories of hope and healing and recovery for people. But where I'm getting at with this is the fact that what you're describing is your bottom.
Yeah.
But you had a certain level of insight at that bottom where many people like myself don't have. We're so delusional that it is just beyond like the levels of awareness that you're speaking of and desires. Realizing that you're missing out on certain things. Because my place where I was, the denial was so real. Is that I actually wasn't missing out, or those things weren't worth having, and they were just, So this is where I want to ask you, because I think that it plays a pivotal role and is so special, and it has been pre, post, mid journey for you. You also started therapy, not just for the addiction, but for the trauma, the shame, and the sexual wounds.
Yes.
How did that expand your understanding of what you were really healing from?
It's when you don't know what when you're unaware of the wounds that you're trying to heal through addiction, it's very easy not to be kind to yourself. When you begin to understand the spider web of events that have occurred in your life, and even before you were born, biology, your parents' trauma, how they treated you, the relationships that they formulated for their own benefit, and you start to add all of that together, and you start to look at it almost like on a whiteboard, right? You can begin to see, while these are behaviors that I am not proud of, I don't have to hate myself for not having the right tools to medicate them. And when you are more skilled at knowing how you got here, it's more empowering to use the helpful tools as you move forward. So I guess it really boils down to just being a little kinder. This does not make me special, and I'm sure it happens to so many who are in the midst of an addiction that they are cognizant of. But my self-talk and my self-narratives were absolutely brutal while I was in use. And they are far different these days.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, I'm happy to be able to say it.
What did it feel like to choose yourself over the life you had built, the career, the community, and the comfort zone?
Well, I had to rebuild everything. When I moved here not knowing anyone, and the business basically had to be restarted. So I didn't bring any foundational wealth or safety net or cushion. And it felt like an opportunity to reinvent myself in all ways, physically, mentally, financially. And in doing so, when you're reinventing, you really have to think like, well, what do I want? What am I reinventing for? Who am I reinventing for? And while it was difficult and lifestyle had to change, and there were struggles I felt like an adolescent again. I felt like I was back in New York in my early 20s, and I had energy and I was fearless and there was nothing to lose, so I may as well try. I didn't have any shame or paranoia that I was going to be found out about living this double life or, participating in this shameful drug. It just felt like a really good time to discover who healthy, sober, truthful David is. And when you're doing that, it's hard not to have optimism.
If you were to think about one of the major things, or a couple bullet points of the major things that you did differently when you moved here in life, what were they? I stayed off Grindr and any hookup apps. That had been a consistent, whether I was using or not, for the last however many years they'd been around. And I started dating when I felt like I was able to date. I started dating with intention. I met my now husband on Tinder, and both of our profiles stated in our profiles that we were looking for something serious. So I think that was a real help on a multitude of levels. One, party drugs are pretty saturated on everywhere
apps. So not giving myself convenient access to finding a source here in town was one reason. And two, I didn't want to put myself in a position with casual sex where I wasn't going to be treated well, that I wasn't going to be respected, that I was, drugs or not, sometimes casual sexual encounters can be almost masturbatory for the person. You're just there in the room. They don't care about you, how you're feeling. They're not checking in. Sometimes there's not as much consent. And so I just didn't want to be around that energy anymore. And so if I was going to date, then I wanted to make sure that it was in a place where I held control, some boundaries, and expected some from whoever I was on a date with. So that was one. Continued therapy. I still have therapy surrounding my mom today because it will most likely be, if things don't change with her, it'll be one of the biggest wounds of my life. So I'm trying to get to a similar place with her that I did with my dad. It's a little harder with her because her behavior isn't tied to something as obvious as alcohol.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot more.
Yeah, the way
entangled.
she treats me is a cocktail of her trauma and
sidestep. And I'm going to say this not to preach to you, but to untangle this I can in some ways relate, but I also understand from being present in the middle of many similar situations.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but with your dad, much more black and white, substance, no substance.
Yeah.
The devil in the room is the devil in the room. With mom, a lot of what took place were her own, like, learned coping mechanisms that you inherited.
Correct.
That still pop up today.
Oh, yeah.
In different ways with different people.
Yeah.
In all areas of life.
Yeah.
And I'm raising my hand as I... So I think that, like, you're talking about things where you had someone who gaslit you, manipulated you, taught you people pleasing 101.
Yeah.
And codependency 101.
Yes.
That shit stays with you and is hardwired.
Yes. Yeah.
And it takes so many of us a lifetime.
Yes. Which
unwind.
is why therapy is so important. I'm in the beginning of developing a relationship with a couples therapist. Not because we need it, but we know that we will, and we want to have trust.
And that's the way to do couples therapy. Hear me now. Couples therapy is to start when you're healthy.
Yes.
It is not when the problems start. You do couples therapy when you're in a good place. Yeah. And yeah, you might go 4 months because you're like, we don't really have anything to talk about, but we'll come back and do it.
But we will.
4 months later.
There will be a moment.
There's always
inevitable
stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
I've never walked away and been like, we just wasted an hour.
No, never. In one of our recent sessions, we talked about a circumstance or a dynamic where my partner is somewhat silent and a bit pulled back in a moment of high intensity, or where he's feeling I'm stressed or have a level of anxiety. And I took that as, well, that's what my mom used to do. She would withhold. She would make me guess what was wrong with her. When I did guess what was wrong with her, it was never the right one. I was always having to anticipate the fallout and the needs for her. And so I was thinking that that's what he was doing. We found out in couples therapy, his response to my anxiety or me having, a bit of a spell, was, I'm going to give him space. I'm going to just kind of let him breathe it out. But I interpreted his, in essence, grace. He's giving me some space to breathe as this is what my mom did. She always just withheld. And I'm always, are we okay? Are you okay? Like, those are the questions I would have to ask. And we would have never been able, like, we left from that meeting, like, what a great aha moment. Because what we're doing is not wrong, but what the filter that we see each other is incorrect.
But you would have never known to communicate that if you hadn't had a third party.
It would have festered and, would have become something bigger.
Thank you for sharing that example.
Well, I have a great partner.
You do.
A very active participant. And he's also in therapy and has his own path towards, health. And so we're on it together now.
I'm so grateful for you. It's so many ways. You both are gems of human beings.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've only got a few more questions.
Okay.
I know I've asked you a million at this point.
Well, I've seen the show, so I was...
you were prepared for me.
I was ready.
All right, so this may sound simple, but it's very important. What does hope look like for you today?
Oh, gosh. Hope. I think it's easy to have hope when you are striving for sympathy and empathy. I think hope is a bridge. Hope is like to get us to the next step. It doesn't have to be realistic even. I hope I'm sober one day. That's great hope. Mm-hmm. I hope I heal wounds with my family. Might not happen tomorrow. It's a good bridge. It's like a decent first step, or like something to just tide you over, even when it feels impossible or insurmountable. So I think hope is a good tool.
Absolutely. I'm going to go backwards and forwards on this really quick. there are people I know that have had to find vicariously through other people access to hope because they had no tenacity. They did not have, in order to have hope, something has to happen in adolescence to teach you that there is the possibility of an untouchable future that could be better. Mm-hmm. This falls under attachment theory and some other theories, and I'm not going to get into all that, but sometimes people are able to identify this, sometimes they're not. Was there something in early adolescence, and I'm talking like 1 to 5 years old, or birth to 5, that you're aware of that was significant, made a significant impact on you, that you think gave you the tenacity and resilience to believe that hope could exist for you?
Yeah. I mentioned at the start of our conversation, my mom's done a lot of really good things about parenting me. One of my jobs now is to be able to see all of it and not just see the negative. Because she desired so fully to be a really good mom, she never discounted or challenged or combated me on being authentically me. So when I was a spicy, zesty 3-year-old who wanted to play with makeup or be in my mom's heels, that was not scary to her. It was not sinful or wrong. It was just a really curious little boy having fun. There was nothing devilish or negative about it. It was just playful, and she really let me be very, very playful. Not only with dolls and Barbies and things like that, but I also had a ton of like Matchbox cars and Legos and things that would be heteronormatively more straight, assuming. There was no limits in terms of my creativity and how I showed up as a child, and I think that she did a really, really good job of that. And hard to not feel like you're fabulous and creative and playful when those early years have been done in that way. So she did a really good job of giving me hope there.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't have that.
So many people don't have that. Yeah. I want to give Deborah her flowers when she deserves them. She definitely does.
There's a lot of healing there to be able to be, a few minutes ago, us just talking about what we were, and then still be able to reflect on the positive with both parents.
People,
and I commend you for that.
Thank you. Parents are people, and people are complicated. And I think we have to be honest with ourselves about the relationship with our parents, but we don't have to demonize them for their shortcomings.
Yeah.
Because I know my parents tried really hard. They still try. She still tries really hard.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing those parts of your story with us. I want to move to some of the advocacy and the exciting things about you and what you're doing today.
Okay. The fun stuff, the easy stuff.
Yes. So am I correct that you were first of all, man of many hats, so PR professional extraordinaire, but also a singer, and the first out gay male country singer out about their how do you phrase that? Identity with, or
HIV status.
HIV status.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I came to Nashville, I never anticipated being a part of the talent. But music has always been a huge part of my life. It's influenced a lot of, it's it's pretty cliche to say, but music has always been a huge part of my life. And when I was here, I started seeing how close I was to all this other talent and how collaborative the music industry really is here, especially on the independent side. And I started getting curious about like, I think I've got songs. Like I've got songs in my heart and in my head. And I started working with other people, and they're, they are, here's what I love about the music industry. For me, I am normally, in my day job, I am one of the most skilled and one of the most knowledgeable in a room when it comes to media. When I'm writing a song, I am uncomfortable. I am digging into deep parts of my subconscious and my memory. I'm wordsmithing. I'm vulnerable. And so for those and many other reasons, the songwriting process has been really fun for me, very cathartic. And when I started to put out my first EP in 2022, someone asked me, well, let me take a step back. I've been open about my HIV status for about 6 years now. And when we started to consider putting things out with my team, someone asked a question, are you going to be open about your HIV status? And I was like, well, there's no really putting that back in the box. Like, I've been on panels, there's interviews, you can Google me, and it's part of who I am. And so then we did a little bit more research and found out that there had not been someone in country music and share about their HIV status. And so it was really just a reality thing, right? Like, I'm not gonna, how can I, when I came out as HIV positive, I called it my second coming out.
Sure.
And when I was thinking about putting out all this music publicly, I didn't want to have to go back into the closet about something that I am so proud of.
Yeah.
And that I have had some of the most incredible experiences with. And so myself and my team decided that it was important that it be a part, a spoke on the wheel of my story. And it's been an honor to hold that title, to be the first. There's not a lot of firsts left.
Yeah.
So it's nice to be.
That's right.
Yeah, it's nice.
I love that you said that. I've never heard. That's one thing I look at all the time about like this stage in my life, and not a lot. I don't feel like a lot of people acknowledge it. Whenever I say it, it's kind of like people are hearing it for the first time, and I'm like, you never think about how like at our age, I'm almost 40. I know you're younger than me, but we're close.
I'll be 40 in August, so I think we're right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, you're older than me, actually.
Oh, okay, shade.
But no, I say all the time, I'm like, treasure the first.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of them, and when you find another one that exists that interests you,
yeah,
enjoy the hell out of it, because the older we get, the fewer we have. Yeah. And so I applaud you, and I love that you recognize that, because not everybody does in life. Let's talk about your new single, Sin Master. What inspired the song, and what are you hoping listeners take away from it?
So Sin is a throwback to, I mentioned at the start of our conversation that I was in this play, S-I-N, and the I in the middle is me. And it is a reflection on some elements of my life where I was either dubbed a sin from the outside or I dubbed it from the inside. Whether it's being gay in an environment that doesn't support that, what it is to be a closeted addict, and what it is to deal with a highly stigmatized disease like HIV. Those are, one of those things is massive. Three of those things, all working in tandem with one another, can make or break you. And I'm at a place in my life where I'm proud of where I'm at, I'm transparent where I'm at, and I know, just being an active participant in our community, that others are going to relate to this. And it's just a really, if you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be here sober writing about the things that could make me the most villainized or despicable person, and sharing it in hopes that it helps other people, I'd be pretty proud of myself.
Yeah. So is it just dropping on like just a regular ordinary day? Or?
So June 20th, during Pride Month, which is a week before National HIV Testing Day, which is on June 27th. And my hope is that anyone who is HIV positive can hear this song. There's not a lot of representation for queer in country, and there's certainly, I'm not aware of another song that so blatantly leans into a diagnosis of this nature. And my hope is that it continues to destigmatize. I get told quite often when I share with people my status, the very first thing they say with these big, sad, compassionate eyes, oh, it's not a death sentence anymore. And they're right, but it's a lot more of that. And I'd really love to be able to, instead of us continuing to go to, oh, thank God it's not a death sentence anymore, like, oh, wow, and what other elements are there of you that make you who you are? And I think destigmatizing it first in our own community, primarily between gay men, is something that I will continue to advocate for. And for the education component, a lot of people still don't know what undetectable status means. And most people are shocked when they find out that I take one pill a day and that I will never transmit HIV to another individual. Those are two things that people are still pretty shocked about. So obviously there's work to be done.
Ignorance runs rampant.
Yeah, fear
Yes.
runs rampant, and ignorance is a symptom.
Yes. Indeed. For anyone listening right now who feels trapped in addiction and shame and secrecy, what would you say to them?
You got to do the work. It's not simple or short, but the work is there for a reason, because it does work. And whether that's rehab for some, therapy for some, leaning on your community, family, or chosen family, I never imagined a world where my life didn't have some sprinkling of drug use. I never imagined a world that I could have beautiful, robust intimacy with my husband. I never imagined. And so if I can see all that to the other side, again, cliche as it sounds, then it's possible for others.
1,000%. David, this has been such an honor.
Thank you. Mine too.
So long overdue, but also purposeful and meant to happen exactly when it finally did.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes. And be sure to check out the links below. We will have the pre-save if it's available when we're releasing this.
Amazing.
But at least you can follow David on his platforms through those links, and check out his new song when it comes out June 20th.
Yes.
Sin Master.
That's right.
I want to close out by thanking you all for spending this time with us, and to remind you that it's never too late to start loving yourself. And as David so eloquently put, the work is not always easy. It's not always simple. But starting is simple. And all it is, ever, is just one decision away from a completely different life.
This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health. If you or a loved one are struggling with trauma, addiction, or mental health, we are ready to answer your questions and help you take that next step. Call our admissions center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promises.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.